Now what has man done? Man can't stand himself for where he's told that he belongs. Man don't understand. Man blames everyone, everyone under the sun. Tell me, what has man become? Man can't help himself, don't know where he can run. Man can't run for help, can't stand anybody else. Man don't know where he's from, don't know where he belongs. Now would man trade tomorrow for a time long forgotten? Man, now what has man done? Man don't understand. What has man become? Now what has man done? Man can't stand himself for where he's told that he belongs. Man don't understand. Man blames everyone, everyone under the sun. Tell me, what has man become? Man can't help himself, don't know where he can run. Man can't run for help, can't stand anybody else. Man don't know where he's from, don't know where he belongs. Now would man trade tomorrow for a time long forgotten?
Recording is on.
Hello everyone, today is Sunday, the 29th of May 2022, and this is meeting 111. This is an open discussion, so we have no real topic for today, so I'm just reading their exhausting week. Yeah, I'm very tired too, so we're not very inspired. We're all a bit like that, our lives are like that, but we can still get together and see if there's things that we can share today. Last week we had a very interesting talk about the healthcare industry and the whole situation of medicine, and Gary was talking about Ivan Illich. There's a lot of reading and a lot of some recordings on this guy and also on the whole subject of medicine, so maybe we could revisit that another time when we've each of us looked at it a bit in depth, and maybe we can start on I don't know what you suggest, or what's coming up from the Reddit this week that we could expand on.
Yeah, I just was just having a quick look at my notes there, and I noticed that Tom put up a post on Reddit about Evola. What's his first name? I've forgotten. And he got a little bit of pushback in the comments about that.
Julius Evola. Julius Evola.
Sorry, Julie.
Julius.
Yes, right. Yeah. Okay. Sorry. And yeah, because there was a question about whether Hugh had spoken about this fellow, and I have a feeling that he must have, but I can't specifically remember what he said. I'm just wondering if anybody else went into that a little bit. If we can develop that a bit more. I didn't follow it up in any detail, but if there's somebody else who followed it up, we could just spend a few minutes on that. I don't know.
I looked at Evola and I knew about him a bit before because my mother was friend with some Italians who worshipped him for some reason, some really right-wing guys. I had a little bit of a I was a little bit reluctant to look at him when I was young. So I went back and I realized that he was very he was coming, I think, from quite an elite family, and I think he had he explored some very interesting things. He was fascinated with the occult and the magic and different things. He was also yeah, he had some visions that were very in line. I think he observed things in the right way. It's just when it came to solutions, and that's when I think it started to go a little bit wrong. And also, you know how people are put in a box, and immediately he was, I think, put in the box of the post-fascist sort of clean up after the war and all these sort of things. So, but yeah, his analysis of society is very close to what we talk about. Tom was right. He has he's quite it's quite eclectic. He goes into all sorts of directions. He was very, very much into the occult, very much.
Yeah, I didn't sort of freshen up my memory on the whole thing, but I mean, one thought that just comes to mind is this peculiarity of the right, where they make, for instance, in the discussions about vaccinations and the virus and all that, they seem to make quite a lot of sense pushing back against the authoritarianism. But, you know, in the same breath, they come out with their climate denial, and it's terribly difficult to take them on board completely. Yeah, sorry, I'm still trying to get ready so my act isn't together if somebody else wants to say something.
Oh,
Sophie, you're muted.
You're muted.
Sorry for that. When Gary was saying that, I looked at the post on Reddit and I looked at the comments, and I noticed that somebody said that Hugh had mentioned Evola several times and read some of his works. And I, of course, don't remember where and when, so maybe when I'll be reviewing, because I'm trying to every week listen to old things to try to put old meetings and put a bit of topics on them so they can tidy things up a bit in the mega thread. I think Mike is doing it too. But it's sometimes a bit difficult to look at Hugh too much. I don't know if you experience the same thing. But anyway, I'd like to find a bit more about what he was thinking of him. It's a very complicated person. It's quite a big body of work. So I don't think I want to spend my time looking too deep into Evola. But the video that was on Reddit was very good at the start, but it ended a little bit. I was not too taken by it. I think I don't want to go too much in too many directions. There's so many people out there, so many interesting people. I think he was a bit death cult eugenist type of person. I would love Tom to have expanded on why he was interested in his work. And did anybody else watch that video called Revolt Against the Modern World?
Yeah, I watched it. Yeah, it kind of reminded me a lot of like leftist critique of like capitalism. So guys like Karl Marx and stuff. But the problem with stuff like that is even if the critique is correct, the like people like Lenin or Hitler, they go the authoritarian road of trying to craft this utopia from the top down, and then it just turns into shit where people are other. There's death camps. There's all that terror, all that terrorism from governments and stuff. So it's like you got to be careful with utopian visions like that because yeah, they turn authoritarian and bad.
Yes, I agree with the dangers of utopia. It's it's a flag that you follow very easily because it's wonderful, it's shiny, and it's what Marxism and religions and all sorts of other writers have, and it's appealing. We all want to write a beautiful story, but I think it's a trap. Yeah, it's a trap. And his utopia was based, I think, on eugenism, on selecting, humans who were worth, who were at the top. He had that theory of the original warrior, and then sort of a degeneration of humans into. So his way of looking at it is not entirely wrong, because we did lose a lot of our talents and a lot of our abilities to operate in the world and in respect with nature. But he looked at it from a point of view that was extremely toxic, I think, and that you find in a lot of discourses of the utopian of the extreme right at the moment too.
Totally. I'm reading at the moment a kind of a manifesto or a utopian book about the collapse or the climate crisis. And the problem with that book, I'm gonna write a review at some point. But the main problem is that this person wants to have the military help in taking over the power of the world or the globe, but as soon as possible he wants to instate the sustainable leadership, and that reminds me of Marxism and the dictatorship of the proletariat. And I'm all for sustainability, but this guy doesn't even define sustainability. And our big leader, our big female leader in Norway in the 1980s, I think, she had a job writing the UN report for our common future, I think it was called, Gro Harlem Brundtland from Norway. She had that job for the UN. And the first thing she did was basically to pervert the concept of sustainability and sustainable development. So she basically said that, this sustainability thing, which used to mean this and this, now it just means that we go ahead and pump oil and just go about our daily business, and try to say some nice words about green stuff, and yeah, it's basically total fraud, right? So the last thing I would want to have happen in the last decade of civilized humanity is to have a totally fraudulent revolutionary government, global government, claiming that but whatever we are doing is sustainable, because if you don't define it even in your sort of basic revolutionary book, your text, your Das Kapital, your Marxist sort of basic book, you don't define what is sustainable and what is not sustainable, then obviously your revolution would just be another bogus revolution where you assume power and then you would just define sustainability to be whatever we do at any given point, right?
Yeah, that's true. And another problem with government control and stuff is with government, comes the invasion of markets and money. And once you got that in place, that determines what your culture is. And if you're trying to have like a normal human culture that's organic, when money and government comes in and commodities and the marketplace, that culture dies. So yeah, that's another difficulty.
On the subject of words there, I was writing something in the comments on the word sustainable. You see, there's lots of words now that are used in the media and the press and sometimes by writers that have a magic property. And if you wave sustainable, you immediately open the door to anything at all. Everybody thinks it's grand. It's like the word green, or there's a list of words like that that are meant to assuage and calm people and make them think that trust me, I'm doing the right thing for you, I'm sustainable and great. And there's so many words like that, and they're if you sometimes I find it very difficult to go near the real what you call the media, the news media, the mainstream media. But if you just listen from a distance and you take a few notes of those words, you'd find that they regularly come back. They're always there. They're used constantly to describe the work of the government, the police, religion, and any sort of big industry. What do you think of this? Have you got any other examples?
I can't think of. Oh, go ahead, Gary.
Thanks. I was just reminded of when I was listening to the first part of Illich's conversation, and he was, just a minute ago, where we were talking about this, military government or whatever, or some kind of authority system taking over to fix things up or declare sustainability or whatever. But Illich was describing the church about around about 1000 AD, just 1100 maybe, around about then. And he was giving the parable of the Good Samaritan, who I suppose everybody knows it, where somebody's injured at the side of the road, and all these people walk past, and nobody helps the person because for various reasons. But at one point, one person does stop to help, and Illich said that the common interpretation of that is probably not correct. I think that what he meant was that the usual interpretation of that is that, well, you should always, be helpful. It's your kind of duty and all the rest of this kind of thing. And he was saying what he was talking about was that the kind of feeling at the time them was that people were very much more identified with their group, their tribes and their villages, that their kind of ethics was connected to their sort of ethnic. So the ethnic, I suppose those two words have probably got the same root anyway, but what was ethical was related to what was their shared ethnic identity. And generally, you probably would tend not to help somebody who was outside of your group just because they are outside. And then he went on to describe how the Good Samaritan who helped, he helped because that was what he felt was the right thing for him to do. And in other words, he was behaving independently. He wasn't sort of being dictated to in any way. He was going with what he felt was his personal responsibility. And he, just to try and get back to the point, he went on to describe how the church kind of annexed Good Samaritanness by making doing good a Christian virtue and a kind of a duty to God or whatever. And what they did was they kind of institutionalized so-called moral behavior. And so they removed from people their individual agency to decide for themselves what they wanted to do, and institutionalized it and said that, you know, what is the right thing to do is what we say, and you obey that. You don't obey your own instinct for what you think might be a proper way to act. And just to draw that back is a little bit like these authoritarian arrangements. Now, you know, we're going to fix up society. We're going to ensure that everything is done sustainably and all that. But again, this power structure that has taken over the whole discourse and taken over the problem, and effectively prevents people from acting according to their own instinct, and certainly according to you know, I mean, the situation at the moment where a lot of people can see that, for instance, the whole sustainability structure is just a facade. You know, it's a joke. But you know, we can see that we're probably going to get caught in this kind of regime where you know, obeisance to this god of sustainability is going to be more or less compulsory, and you'll be heretical if you try to deviate from it. So yeah, I was just want to say, because it had a kind of a parallel with what Illich was saying, and of course, you know, also of course the Catholic Church was also an emerging power structure in that time that he was talking about 1,000 odd years ago. Just as at the moment we get these emerging power structures jostling to take control of you know, well, in this instance, taking control of sustainable development and greenwashing and all the rest of that. So I'll keep quiet for a minute if anyone wants to comment.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of good things to be said about Jesus and the Good Samaritan. For instance, that I think then, as well as now, 2,000 years later, it's always easier for you as an individual, isn't it, to just look away and go about your own interests instead of helping anyone, because either you'll be put in handcuffs like we saw in America this week, or you'll get into some kind of other trouble because you're trying to do the good thing, right? So I think it's a good thing for Christianity and or for Jesus or whoever wrote the Bible to say that you should do these good deeds, because otherwise people would just not do them, I think. But when it comes to whatever sustainability regime, post-revolutionary regime, I think you should definitely have your skepticism antennas out, because, you know, when they don't even want to define what they mean by sustainability, you know they're talking bullshit. Because as I just wrote in a note on my computer, let's say you have this revolution that this guy wants, right? And the first farmers and bakers make the first 1 million breads to eat after that revolution, right? And you have this whole new ideological economy and all this stuff, and you can't even distribute these breads. And you know, Uh, but my bottom line is for the agriculture is really that no single deed of agriculture has ever been sustainable. Agriculture is basically a non-sustainable practice. It's the first original sin of humanity, basically. So yeah, you can make 1 million breads after the sustainable revolution, the so-called sustainable revolution, but not even that is sustainable if you're going to follow the pre-1980s, pre-Brundtland definition of sustainability, because you are basically taking away from nature, and you are depleting the topsoil. You are, you're messing up the earth, and you are, pushing away the other animals and plants that would otherwise be on that field. So yeah, that's basically my position on that.
Yeah, another thing with the Good Samaritan is that whole situation with the church and trying to tell people not to do these things. That's like trying to put a cop between like people and their conscience, and that's really messed up. And like if people can't be good Samaritans publicly, then they're gonna have to do it privately, because like letting people's consciences wither up and die like that is just messed up. That
That
alone
was
right there.
actually that was actually Illich's point there. He emphasised that it was kind of leaving people's own ability to wither to dry up, because everything had been whatever you were supposed to be doing had been taken over by the authority system. So sorry, I'll let you go on.
Yeah, well, I wasn't gonna go on that much longer, but yeah, like if people are walking around without like a conscience, that's just like basically the life of a robot. That's just not feasible. Like people should rebel against that.
Well, we're being asked to do that at the moment, making these selective decisions about sympathy for Ukrainians and not for, lots of other people in lots of other places who are suffering as much and more. We have a very sacred national day in this country called Anzac Day, where they honour, mostly for the most part, it's in memory of people who were killed in World War One, especially in a rather unfortunate battle in Gallipoli.
I went into sermons from the early. I let myself.
What are we getting there? Oh, okay.
Sorry, I think it was just me because I posted a link, and I think it went on by mistake.
Oh,
Sorry.
okay, fine, okay, yeah. No, what I was saying was there was this particular National Day is a journalist dared to say that, okay, well, on this day of remembering people who died in war, well, why not? Why can't we add in and remember these people and these people and these people who died in this war and this war and the other war? And it was astonishing. She was howled down to such an extent that she left Australia and went to live in the UK to get away from the stigma. That this sense of regard and what's the word, remembrance for people who died in the war was just very much limited to this narrow focus on just Australian and New Zealand soldiers. And that the media was there was just this sort of general outrage that anybody else should be included. In a way, we're going through that again with Ukraine, and of course, there's so many some of the other things. It's kind of, and again, it comes back a little bit to what Illich was saying about the connection between the ethnic and the ethics. And it was an interesting point. And I suppose, the question is, in a very globalized world, and the one you would think that we would be getting over the ethnic bit, but it's probably as bad as it's ever been. Sophie was telling me about a personal incident which demonstrates that somebody she knows, a victim of racial violence, Anyway, I'll leave it at that just for a moment.
Yeah, unfortunately, racist nationalism is as strong as ever in the modern world. Yeah, especially in America.
I'm just wondering, do we want to? Anyone want to continue with this, or we
I wanted to
looking?
say, Gary, thank you very much for bringing up that Good Samaritan analysis by Illich, because it's a very original one, and it's not at all the one that the Catholic Church usually preaches in church. And Illich has got this incredible take on all these things from and he remained in the church actually all his life, even though he rebelled and he had problems with them, but he still plundered on and did his own thing all the way. Yeah, I'm thankful, because that opens an awful lot of possibilities, that conversation on the Samaritan. I think it's something I want to reflect on again. So sorry I made a bit of noise there, but I did post the link to Vimeo for a little
link.
short. Yeah, that's 7-8 minutes where he just extracted from his long talk, where he talks about that. And I put a link to a very nice little book called Tools for Conviviality, because I believe that Illich was a man who really liked to be with other people. He liked to have dinners, meetings, and he thought that conviviality was the essence of human interactions, and being convivial, being welcoming, spending time exchanging with people, what we're doing now, just enjoying each other's company and conversing and having a nice meal. But that we can't do that online. Thank you, Gary, for bringing that up. Anyway, that's what I wanted to say.
Yeah, I was just thinking when you mentioned conviviality that I'm just wondering how closely connected conviviality is, because Hugh spoke of what word did he use? Concordial. It was a very similar word. I just can't bring it to mind at the moment. But yeah, I'm just looking down a couple of things that I wrote about that Illich, and he used the term that what's happened is the institutionalization of neighborliness, and a little bit like how the state tends to annex everything. Something starts off being radical, and then in order to sort of control it, the state takes it over and codifies it and regulates it, and it then becomes, like part of the state's repertoire to institutionalize something that that was once on the outside, but at the same time as it does it, it blunts it, rounds it off, takes the life out of it. Takes it out of well, Illich said it's taking it out of people's individual responsibility, and so their sense of it atrophies. Just looking here to see if there's anything.
In my lifetime, I have seen this happening to childminding, because when I've seen it happening, because there was an untold, unregulated way of minding children in the environments where I lived, where if the mother was busy at something in the garden, working or doing something outside, there was always either a neighbor or a grandmother, and it would take the kids, and the kids were not in one belonging to one house. Every house was their house. There was, of course, maybe when I was young, women didn't work as much, but that's not I don't know is that good or not, but you know what we think about work. But the way is that things were without any money exchange. It was a mutual aid between women thing. Another mutual aid thing that existed, and you can see that in America today with the shortage in babies' formula. Is that a long time? I mean, not a long time ago.
Oh my, that was outrageous.
Yeah, but
Sorry
you know,
for interrupting.
yeah, I've
When-
seen what happened. Yes, go ahead. Sorry.
But the thing is, you when Russell Brand, I don't know if you saw Russell Brand's rant about
No.
the baby formula incident. Russell's usually pretty good at covering the various different aspects of this, but I was astonished that he got through a 10 or 15-minute rant covering an enormous amount of information and different perspectives on it. And at the end of it, he didn't explain why there was apparently a shortage of boobs, which kind of got me like this, you know, and I thought, oh my.
That's what I was going to say, because I've seen breastfeeding promoted, not promoted, normal thing when I was young, I mean, 60s, 70s, you know, but already Nestle and the big companies of milk had already crept into the maternities trying to push midwives and doctors to tell the women that, you know, oh, if you have a little difficulty breastfeeding, just give a bottle, it's easier. It was just, you know, that sort of way a lot. But I remember that's we had in the countryside what we call wet nurses, which means that when a woman couldn't breastfeed for some reason, if she was just sick, tired, she didn't have milk or whatever, it can happen, there was somebody in the neighborhood that always had enough milk for her baby. So you used to lend your baby for feeds, or a woman would come and live in your house or come with her baby and she'd feed the two, or you know, there was sort of things like that that were also unorganized between women, with no money involved. It was part of a normal, you know, household. And if you mention a wet nurse or breastfeeding to certain people at the moment in response to the formula shortage, you're going to get, you're going to get lit alive, because it doesn't seem like it even enters the mentality of people that they could be without baby formula, but they might be without it. And what are they going to do then? If a woman doesn't want to breastfeed or has no milk and she doesn't want to look around her to find somebody to feed her baby, is she going to let her baby die or what? You know, it's just like, what the hell? But I didn't listen to that Russell Brand thing. Gary, can you expand on what he was saying?
Oh, no, it wasn't so much what he said, it was what he didn't say. That my astonishment was that he got through the entire discussion about the reasons behind this shortage of baby formula without at all even mentioning the fact that this isn't how babies are meant to be fed, or that there's any alternative that people could be turning to, or it was just nothing at all. It was just completely taken for granted that no formula meant no food for babies, and that was the end of the story. And so this was a completely insurmountable catastrophe. And it was just the omission, right? It wasn't what he said, it was what he didn't say that got me going, you know.
Oh yeah, because no, it's the elephant in the room. It's like, you know, it's a big thin out of thin air, this formula thing. Like, okay, there's no more formula, so yeah, go back to nature. Like, there's no more vegetables, you grow your own. There's no more, I don't know, there's no more fish in the shop. You go and set a net or get a fishing rod and go to the lake. And this type of I know urban people, I might be a little bit, but you know, there's always ways around. But nobody is talking about the breastfeeding and that. No one. It's gone completely out the door. Like, if it was not something, it's something, or some extremists do and some people do. There is certain countries where there's a bigger uptake, and actually it's usually the wealthy countries now that are on the rise of breastfeeding, and most of the countries like sub-Saharan Africa, South America, who are, especially in deprived environments, are actually relying on baby formula. So in terms, they've wiped out breastfeeding knowingly from those countries because they knew they had a huge market because of the high birth rate there. And, so I've seen in 1980 the program of Nestle and SMA for propagating their formula in, I can't remember the country, was it Congo, or I was reading a thing anyway about it. And what they were doing is that they were going around distributing free boxes of formula to women, and saying, well, and to mothers, and saying, well, listen, try this, it's much better, it's modern, it comes from the West, more sort of, promoting language type of thing. And within a year, there was an enormous amount of babies' death from diarrhea, because they didn't teach properly how to, that when you use formula, you have to sterilize bottles, use a sterile water, because you reconstitute milk from powder. And especially if you're in a country like very hot, you can propagate an awful lot of diseases. By breastfeeding, you don't have to do all that. It's all naturally, from breast to mouth. So there was a terrible death rate because of lack of information on the risks of dehydration by diarrhea. And then probably they say within 5-10 years, they had nearly wiped out breastfeeding in certain villages, because it's a skill. I mean, it's a skill that you learn from women. If a woman sees her mother breastfeeding her little brother or sister, or if a neighbor, young woman or a teenager sees, it's a kind of a thing that just is propagated without any teaching. But if that disappears, you see your elders filling a bottle and feeding a baby, well, you eradicate that practice completely from the community. So it was a sign for a lot of women that you were more westernized if you were giving a bottle, that it was more the thing to do, and it's sort of was wiped out in lots of places. And even though there's still an awful lot of women in Africa who are breastfeeding their children, I mean, I'm saying it's still quite high. There has been some areas and some places in India and some places in other countries that have been entirely wiped out. And I don't know, is it on the comeback? I haven't read anything about that, but that's what they did.
Yeah, it's quite interesting. Yeah, actually, you reminded me. I remember when my nephew was born, and my sister actually had to go to classes at the hospital to teach how to successfully breastfeed the baby. And I thought it was rather strange. I hadn't really thought about it before, but it just goes back to what you're saying about the loss of that natural example of not just doing it, but how it's done as well, So
yeah, there's classes now to how to eat, how to have sex, how to breathe. It's just like how to walk. I know some women who are bring their kids to special classes there's a way to improve the way of I mean, completely cutting out all instinct, all learning from community, from example, from elders. It's unreal. Yeah, breastfeeding is now a thing. Well, you're going to breastfeed. Oh my God! Instead of when I was young, it's, oh, you're going to give a bottle. Oh my God, no, I can't breastfeed. What am I going to do? You see, it's completely turned around. It's unreal.
Yeah,
Totally
that kind of reminds me of a tangent that guy went on in that 8th Circuit model video where he talked about how people are starting to detach from their bodies, like in that movie WALL-E. Like the alien cortex is like trying to eject out of the body and not have to deal with all that gross biology it perceives as, dirty. Yeah, that's not good. That's not healthy. We're animals. We're animals. All other mammals on this planet breastfeed. So
Thank you for posting those talks. I haven't listened to all of them. I've listened to the 3 first ones. It's really interesting, that guy. And I really loved Wall-E. I mean, I'm still showing it to my grandchildren. And I think that was a vision. Of course, it's science fiction, vision of the future. But there's a message in there that's absolutely right. And, remember the obese people who can't walk anymore? And people have become so used to their chairs that they get enormous and they don't move. There's a lot in that little movie.
Yeah, I liked it because it's sort of like the tricking of Kronos, so using Kronos' own technology against him to get humans back to Earth. Yeah.
But that even came out in a post, I think on Reddit today, about the space junk. I think Bob made a comment that, well, that's all right, it will stop us from leaving Earth. The thing is, we don't really need to anyway. But Derek Jensen touched on that I don't know who posted the little talk by Derek Jensen about the street gangs, boys in street gangs.
Oh
in
yeah,
America.
I posted that one.
You well, that seems to be related, because the critical point in that little talk was where he said, well, all teenagers want to die, but they don't want to actually die. What it means is that it's a transformation that they want to undergo, but they don't realise the true nature of that. So you get all these perverted forms, distorted forms of transformation. But I mean, it's there's a parallel with the Wall-E or Wall-E, whatever you want to call it, as well, because these people had transformed themselves into these, what they thought was a very sophisticated and evolved form of humanity, but it was a mistransformation in which they had actually become less than what they were rather than something more. And I think I could tie together a little bit of Illich in that again too. And he made the comment again. It's this theme of handing over our either responsibility or our personal transformation to something less when we think that we're doing the right thing, but we're actually not. We're diminishing ourselves in the process of that. And he said, the sin is missing the personal facing of one another. For its perversion is a vast architecture of impersonal institutions. And he was referring to things like the social security systems, healthcare systems, all this kind of thing, where an institution was taking over, a kind of a faceless institution was taking over the care of human beings for one another, and therefore removing the what's the word, validity, it's taking the vitality out of people helping each other for themselves. And it probably also comes back to the baby formula thing as well, where, we're handing over something that should be a source of human contact and development, and sort of handing it over to a container from a pharmaceutical company, and they now are the intermediaries between the mother and the child, and kind of severing the personal connection. I guess the severance of the personal connection and reduction of your own sort of diminishment of humanity is the theme that runs through all of it.
Well, it's the danger of the exception becoming the rule in the domain of breastfeeding. You see, all through history, there's been supplements for women who were mothers who died, or because a lot of mothers died in childbirth. So if you didn't have a wet nurse, sometimes you used a goat or cow's milk, and there was some archaeologists have found some old bottles for babies. But they were an exception. But when the market saw an opportunity to dehydrate milk and sell it, there was such a market for that the exception became the rule. That's another, that's what I'm seeing. I think about the introduction of formula. And what came to mind when you said the phrase that all teenagers want to die, it's something that's extremely important and denied. And we have often talked in our conversations about teenagers missing initiation and missing the journey to face death and to accept death. And that missed initiation is what's causing the self-harm epidemic, the suicide epidemic, the drug epidemic, the violence epidemic in more and more young people. It's not just the sickness of our society, which is in a circular way back into this cycle. But it is this need to die, this wanting to die that is not addressed. It's addressed in the wrong way by all the institutions saying, oh my God, there's an epidemic of suicide. Young people want to die. Yes, they want to die. Yes, they want to die, or they want to face their death. They want to see what is death. They want to play with death. They want to, and yes, the rituals are not performed anymore. The rituals of contact with nature, physical contact with nature, danger, pain, cold, heat, encounters with animals or fish. And all this is taken out of the equation at the crucial age and carried on then into adulthood with a huge void that is filled by alcohol, gambling, and whatever, and work and allegiance to false powers. But yes, Gary, all teenagers want to die, and it's a good thing. I'd say it's a good thing.
It's a sense of starvation of authentic experience. They're going. You can see. Well, I suppose that shooting was probably one example where, in order to get a sufficiently compelling experience, the person has to go to some frightful extreme. Whereas in a more sane society, you would have more less alienated experiences, and so they would have more power, and you wouldn't need to go to such frightful extremes in order to feel as though you were alive or that you mattered or this kind of thing. I was going to make another point. It's just kind of lost out of my brain at the moment.
But the piercings and the tattoos are coming at a younger and younger age. Sorts of things like that I don't know. Is it a collective and conscious, or is it something?
Well, let's see. They're probably substitutes for an authentic experience. I've got back what I wanted to say, which was connected up with I think another post that was put up about attention ADHD, and maybe it wasn't a post. I might have read it somewhere else, but I'll just go into it briefly. And one of the things there that came out of that was that the person who was writing the article was sort of trying to develop the line that actually the person with ADHD is probably technological industrial society's nemesis, that these people are kind of have appeared as a bit of a pushback because they just won't be motivated by anything that isn't intrinsically worthwhile doing. So they had this sort of they just absolutely wouldn't be satisfied or motivated in any way by anything that wasn't that didn't really interest them vitally and have some sufficient validity, because it seems to be the disease of the society we're in, that most of the things that most people do all the time are completely not connected. They're just alien things. They're tasks that they do which aren't directly related to their survival. They're just so repetitive, unrelated things. And, that's another sense in which we become disconnected. So we look at these people, ADHD people, and think there's something wrong. But in fact, again, the tendency is that we interpret things the wrong way around instead of taking a lesson from it, and saying, yeah, hey, all right, so if you've got ADHD, you might legitimately still have an issue, but there's a lesson that can be learned from this in terms of most of the people doing things that just bore them to death, that they're not motivated by it, or really wasting their lives away on this kind of thing. And I guess that could be connected back to what we're just talking about with the young people wanting to die. And go on, sorry, if you've got a point, I'll
Yeah,
share.
I mean, I was just gonna make a personal point. I related that to that a lot because, like, in elementary school, and still today, I see visions and animal spirits and stuff. And in elementary school, I got in a lot of trouble for going around telling people about that. They put me in counseling and stuff. And so then I learned that, yeah, the authorities are going to destroy me if I go talking about this stuff. So I started drawing. I almost didn't make it through school, through high school and middle school, because I didn't want to do math or read these boring textbooks. So yeah, I was like a D and C minus student, barely made it through school because focusing on all that boring shit is unbearable.
And so
Yeah,
many are like you, GB, and they only manage to operate through stealth, hiding, pretending, and sometimes at the cost of a lot of their happiness. And also, Gary, that article that you referred to is very interesting, saying that people with ADHD are against the clock too. Isn't it? It's just amazing how they just how it's that.
Yeah, that's the thing too, is like the clock isn't necessary. Like I I do things when I feel like it, and to normies that sounds bad, but all my responsibilities get done. They just don't get done by the clock.
yeah, they all. I'm just trying to find a reference to that article. I'm not sure that it was a Reddit post or something else that I read. But yeah, they also went into that issue of what you just said about, the doing everything by the clock as well was also a definite non-starter for ADHD people. And I know what you mean about the school experience. A friend of mine who's an artist who had very much the same experience at school. And had to develop all these sort of strategies for slipping through without letting them traumatize him or try to change him too much. But as Sophie was just saying, it did leave him with permanent, I don't know what you would call it. Well, I mean, problems in terms of the fact that the adaptations he made to survive school didn't didn't serve him very well once he left school. But he kind of got stuck with them for the rest of his life. So the damage is done one way or the other.
Yeah, it's like it's a broken heart, like that, at least that's my experience of it. But I think one of the reasons why I didn't end up with too bad of, habits and pathologies is because, like, even when I was a child, I was already like identifying with animals. So I was like trying to think how a wolf would think. Like, how do I skirt these humans trying to destroy me?
Yeah, I mean that's great to have hit upon a strategy. Because I mean, you probably observed yourself other people who might have been in similar situations who didn't find something that could help them through, and they could end up being processed by the system and really messed up, or completely, um, just not being able to function properly at all.
Yeah, yeah, it's hard. They screw you up. They try to guide your identification process in a bad way, try to make you into a
Mm.
robot. Um, yeah, I don't know. All I know is it messes people up. I can't really talk on their traumatized experience of it, but yeah, school is hell. That's all I got to say about that.
It's very interesting. There's a term in the article that says that at the heart of ADD is a blindness to time. As I like that term because it's a blindness to time, but is that a defect or is that an original state? The blindness to time, because if you look at animals, for example, because you're talking about them, DB, they possess that blindness to time. They've got the cycles of the day and the year built into their instinct, but they have this blindness to time. There's time for feed, there's time for walk, there's time for sleep, play, but they I like that term. And
Yeah,
yeah,
the animals are pure Kairos time, like pure Kairos all the time. There's like I can't think of an example of them using chronological time at all. I think it's just pure in the moment, doing as they feel is necessary to survive and have fun, depending on what kind of species they are. Yeah, there's none of this clockwork, mechanized, um, artificial top-down stuff going on, it seems, out there. And that's another thing is like a couple of friends of mine were talking about like cells as machines. I'm like, no, biological processes that are not machines. You can't see them that way. That's totally incorrect. There's no chronological, predictable programming going on at all levels in biology. That's not, no, there's spontaneity in there that machines don't have.
that's why Hugh was saying, and he didn't like the word hope, but he liked to use the fact that there was a glimmer of hope in the fact that there was such an unpredictability in especially in the right brain of the human being, and that couldn't be taken into account by the machine ever, ever, this unpredictability. And yes, the animals are in the now. They're totally in the present, in the Kairos. They're in the now. Yeah, definitely. Mm.
Just was one point I wanted to insert a little bit earlier regarding the Derek Jensen thing about the teenage death wish and the gang behavior, and was that one of the other sins of the modern world is separating the generations. So you're going to start the recording again, Sophie? Okay. Just continuing again regarding Derek Jensen's little video. Does anyone know the title of that? I don't think I've got that written down. I just should mention it during the talk for people to refer to. But yeah, what I was saying was the separation of the
Was it recently
generations.
posted, Gary? Was it recently posted on Reddit?
Yes, on Reddit, I'm fairly
I
sure.
think I'll find it.
Short talk by Derek. Oh dear. Yeah, I don't think I've got it here.
I've got it. I'll link it in
Yeah.
there.
Yeah.
Hold on.
I just like to mention it in the audio, so if anyone's listening, they don't have to follow it up. It's easy to get it.
Yeah, I posted it as a reply to one of your comments in the Wrestle brand, but I put the link in the comment thing in the Jitsi chat for everybody.
Okay. Yeah, no, he had me thinking about other ways in which, because Sophie was talking about the lack of initiation processes, but that's also very much connected with the absence of older people guiding younger generation. You know, the generations are separated by the processes of the society we live in. Young people are in schools or educational institutions, and you know, other people are in their work environments, and in any event, extended family systems aren't living in the one place. They're geographically separated, and so you get you don't get the handing down of any generational wisdom or teaching, even going back to what Sophie said earlier about the breastfeeding that example being in a traditional kind of household all the time, but not anymore. And so, we've kind of got these pigeonholed generations who are the vacuum of information is being filled by institutions rather than people that you know or are related to. So it's this sort of impersonal and institutional takeover of the transfer of wisdom. The trouble is, there's not much wisdom coming with it.
With breast milk, you also transmit immunity. From the woman's antibodies and everything that she has that she has encountered in her life. She's transmitting it to the baby. So there is, of course, we know that babies died a lot more of infectious disease a long time ago. But people are not in. People are debating whether it's because of poverty and poor nutrition that their exposure to any type of infection would kill them, more than the fact that they were not vaccinated. Because Illich in his book Medical Nemesis does an extended analysis of the so-called progress of medicines in terms of infectious disease and epidemics. And the figures are startling. I'm not going to go into it in this meeting. If you want to look at the book, it's starting to see that really the story of polio, tuberculosis, and all sorts of other diseases has been grossly manipulated by the medical world. And in fact, when he visits the statistics, the numbers, and the stories, the narrative is totally destroyed. So I'm not a conspiracist. How can you not be a conspiracist when you've been in this group for a while? But what I mean is that when I sometimes when I'm really angry, I think, well, it goes together, this suppression of breast milk and with the huge campaigns of massive immunizations and vaccinations of baby in time. It's just the same kind of timeline. When the decline of breastfeeding happened, that's when the uptake of vaccinations in the world for babies started. But what do we know in the long term is going to happen with this? I'm not advocating to not vaccinate your child. I'm not saying that. I'm saying that, it's like everything has to be taken in a huge systemic view and context. And the figures can be manipulated to suit the companies, like we've seen in a recent story starting with C. You can make the figures do anything and particularly frighten people. I don't know if the massive immunization campaigns that have been done in Africa, India, and South America by the various charities have improved or not the life of the people. I'm very, very doubtful, and I hate to say that because I used to think when I was young, oh, I'm going to be a doctor going to look after the poor people. I've been through the kind of mentality. We're going to bring all our wonderful Western medicine, and we're going to save all these. And when I started to look deeper and deeper into it, I completely changed my outlook, and I'm still asking myself questions at my age. I really don't know.
Well, I think that's one of those situations where reducing intermediaries between people and their necessities is a good idea. So, like with the breastfeeding situation, especially, so it seems that the baby formula is mostly an unnecessary intermediary that causes harm in the long term. I can't say for sure. I'm just speculating because I'm not a woman and I don't know too much about children, but that's what it seems to me. And that just in general, if there's intermediaries between you and necessities that you can get rid of, I think it's just wise to just do it.
And for the woman, it's highly beneficial for her health to do so because it reduces a lot of problems that can happen after you have a baby if you don't breastfeed, in terms of getting the womb back to its right size, getting your hormones back in sync, getting your tiredness, healing, the tone of the body, because breastfeeding activates all sorts of natural processes in the body that bring back the energy after the tiredness of pregnancy. There's all sorts of things that are beneficial. Nearly everything is good because it's natural. We don't need to stay or compare, like some doctors and midwives are doing with the patients, telling them the downsides of breastfeeding and the good sides of breast bottle. This is completely perverted language, perverted conversation. There is nothing to condemn in breastfeeding, but there has been situations where it can't happen. That's something that's always been addressed in history. To come back also to the immunity deficit when children are fed formula, it also fits an agenda, doesn't it, to think that, well, a long time ago there wasn't many intermediaries, like you say, and people were living in small communities, so they were not exposed to a lot of infections, and if they did, well, one tribe would be wiped out, but the other ones would, because they wouldn't be traveling that far to propagate it, and that was it. But with it all ties into our new industrialized civilization, the need to immunize all these people who are living far away, who are prospective travelers, people who are going to be maybe future slaves, who are going to be traveling, who are going to be used in the machine. So you are preparing and priming entire populations with immunization so that they can start invading airports and buses and trains and be part of the horror machine. I see that as a whole thing. Massive immunizations, massive stop of breastfeeding, massive healthcare deficits, and all the excesses that we are seeing at the moment, the excess of prescriptions of antibiotics, the excess of everything is to be analyzed through that view of the machine.
Yeah, the natural was always best. That's my position anyway. And to return to the clock, I was on a midsummer mountain trip like 7-8 years ago, and it was a kind of slow spring, slow summer, or lots of snow still in the mountains. And I had this epiphany in a way, because I was waiting for the snow to melt or for it to decide to go further up in the mountains. So I was basically sitting there in a snow-covered landscape where the snow used to go away earlier. And I heard what do you call that in English? The cuckoo bird, right? And there's lots of Norwegian songs about the cuckoo bird, of course, like in any culture. So basically, what happens when you get a 3 or 4 weeks later removal of the snow, melting of the snow in mountains, then every animal or bird that is dependent on the blueberry bushes and all of the other plants that come up as soon as the snow is gone is put on hold. All of their activities are put on hold, and they have to mate later, and they have to start feeding later, and all those things. So obviously the what is use term for this other time, the Kairos time? Yeah. So basically all the other beings on this planet are on the Kairos time. It's like when it's gone, and then we can start our spring season. And before that happens, everybody, if you're a mammal or a bird, you have to just find other things to do, while waiting for the snow to go away, or for this other climate thing to come into place. So so absolutely, these other species are much more prepared, I think, than us as human beings, or as civilized human beings anyway, for a delay, or for a slight deviation from the norm. And that's also why I think most of the still living species today will also be more resilient when our community collapses, when the human society collapses, because they're not dependent on this field of corn or whatever, to get the right temperature and precipitation at the right time, like we are. We are sort of very, very fine-tuned to the stable climate over the past 10,000 years, I think. Whilst the birds and the animals are not, they can always do plan B or plan C, but humans, we only have plan A. It's the only plan we got, right? And then I just wanted to say something about school, because you mentioned school earlier when I was out. For the past week, I've been watching a lot of professional and amateur videos about Ted Kaczynski, the Unabomber, because of our special on Wednesday. No, on last Sunday, was it? Yeah. So the thing is that I was also a natural wonder when it came to mathematics. I had no idea I had any skills in mathematics before I came to the first week or the first month of the first class in school. But then I just excelled totally, and it was just so easy for me. So I cannot even be proud because I and claim that I put a big effort into it, because I didn't. It was just in me. I was just born with it, basically. And I also saw on the net in the past week that I'm the same personality type, the Jungian personality type. Jung was a contemporary of Sigmund Freud. So he was another psychologist I think in Austria as well as Sigmund Freud. And so he basically divided humanity into 16 different personality types. And of course, of those 16, I'm in the least common one. I'm in the most abnormal category, and it's the same category as Ted Kaczynski, as it happens. And then I also had a phone call with my mother about milk because I had some kind of allergic reaction to cow milk. After the breastfeeding, I had to go to the hospital because of some cow milk allergic reaction, and my mom's retelling of the story of the isolation in hospital was kind of reminiscent of what Ted's mom said about him, because he got a case of he got some kind of rash on his body, and so he had to be isolated at a very young age from his family in hospital. But I don't really think that was important to his personality or what happened to Ted Kaczynski later, with the killing spree and stuff. I think that's just something that mothers are very, very worried about when you're like a toddler or when you're like 1 or 2 years old, right? But the thing is, I was also into mathematics, and I totally excelled in it. I got the best grades all the way up to gymnasium in Europe. But then the good thing that happened to me that didn't happen to Ted was that I discovered girlfriends, and romanticism and stuff, and so that totally transformed me, because I very soon realized that you couldn't use mathematics to understand women. That was totally the opposite of what you needed in order to understand women. So I turned from mathematics to philosophy, basically, philosophy and literature and stuff. So because mathematics is fun for the thing that it can do, but if you're any kind of a normal person, you will very soon discover that it cannot solve every problem on the planet, right? For instance, the very near to hand problem of how to live with a girlfriend, right? I think that was sort of my epiphany in gymnasium or high school in American, that it's like totally useless when it comes to understanding other human beings.
I'm just reminded of something humorous that Sophie was telling me about shooting lessons. And you remember I sent the little video of that song that you can't get a man with a gun. And I'm just thinking of Tolstoy finding out that you can't get a girl with algebra. It's sort of a song for that as well.
No. Maybe if you make a beautiful equation.
Yeah, beautiful. Oh gosh. Yeah.
What were
So,
you saying? What you were saying going south earlier in the talk about the cuckoo and coming back, and the melting of the snow brings on a very big synchronicity, because the cuckoo has returned since April, but at the moment he's very active around my place, and I can hear him all day and evening. He just goes cuckoo, cuckoo constantly. But anyway, made me think that you talk about the resilience of animals as opposed to humans. But look at the fact also that those animals, those birds, for example, the cuckoo, are migratory, so they're nomads, and they live their winter in Africa, and they come north in our European summer, as far north as as your parts in Norway, they are, in terms of change of climate or global upheaval of weather, these birds are equipped to different environments. They experience their winter in a very quite a hot continent in Africa, even though it's not, and they come to our summer that can be quite warm here. They're like, if you transpose that to humans, again, we go back to the fact that nomadic people will be much more resilient than sedentary, whether they're indigenous or not. Because if you take a tribe of some people in Africa, if there is an ice age, or if they can't get their food in the forest anymore, they're fucked. I mean, they're just not nomads. They don't know how to adjust to different things.
Yeah, that's a very interesting point. I never thought about that actually, because for the birds, and I've been recently thinking that I would have liked to say a David Attenborough movie about how the birds started, going north and south and stuff. But the interesting thing for our time is like, yeah, absolutely. If they can live in Africa, totally they can overwinter in Greenland. If it gets warmer here, so they can totally deal with higher temperatures, because at some point, I think if the globe is going to keep on warming, which everything looks like it's going to, then at some point that pattern will stop. The birds will no longer go south, right? And I'm called going south. So, but anyway, but the birds won't necessarily go south if it becomes like 10 degrees warmer in Greenland and in the Nordic countries. So that's obviously one of the resilient points. And
but the cuckoo needs a kind of a cooler place than the deadly heat of the African summer to nest. That's a steal nests.
Yeah, they steal their nest.
Yeah, they're pirates. They're totally nomadic pirates. They fly all the way from Africa and steal the nests that poor little birds around here have taken weeks to build, and they just take it and just throw it.
And that's one of the big problems for a rapidly changing world, because, as you say, with the cuckoo bird, a lot of species are dependent on other species, right? So if the cuckoo bird has it's sort of plan A for 10,000 years has been to just steal the nest of another bird. But if that other bird or those other bird species go away, then the cuckoo bird will maybe have to actually have their own nest, right? Or so a lot of species are actually dependent on other species for their daily life.
So nomads are depending on sedentary people, well, sedentary creatures. For certain nomads are like the cuckoo, for example. But I suppose in humanity we might have examples if we looked. But yeah, the nomadic depends on the sedentary. Everything is connected.
Yeah, and the project that I mentioned to you, Sophie, earlier about the sort of collapse decision tree is about to whom is the societal collapse a problem. And when I say whom, I use Derek Jensen's term where he talks about some people are animals, some people are plants, yeah. So basically all other species as well as us, because we are only one little species, even though we're 99% of the problem on the planet, we are only one in 10 million species or something, right? So a lot of the United Nations, what do you call them? Their goals or their collapse indicators or whatever, a lot of those goals or their problems, ecological problems, they will stop short, they will stop abruptly when our society collapses. So it's like the plastic pollution, the industrial pollution, the toxic pollution from agriculture and stuff, all of those things will stop abruptly when we go away, or not we as humans, but when our society stops functioning, right? So for 99.9% of the species on this planet, the industrial collapse will be a super happy day, right? And that's important. I think it's important to this discussion to be aware that our demise or our going away as Homo colossus, as some people call it. I call it global Homo, but that often gets deleted by Twitter and YouTube, so I cannot say global Homo, but let's say Homo colossus, the industrial man. When we go away, all the other animals and plants will have a huge party in the forest, I think.
Yeah, in relation to the talking about like how the cuckoo depends on other species, that reminds me of the fractal theory of evolution, where Hugh was talking about filter feedback loops and parasitic filter feedback loops. So like predatory hunting animals like lions are like a parasitic filter feedback loop on like zebras and impalas and stuff, or whatever gazelle type ungulates live near lions. I don't know exactly. And then wolves are like a parasitic filter feedback loop of like elk and deer and stuff. And then the elk and deer are parasitic filter feedback of like grass and bushes and certain, trees. Yeah, so all that stuff is connected. Yeah, it's like all eddies in a stream, all connected together. Yeah, and it's interesting to talk about this stuff with like normies. Like when you say like, yeah, when this system implodes, it's gonna be great for the animals. I'll clap to you. It's like, well, aren't you part of the system? It's like, yeah, but I'm not rooting for it to win. I'm rooting for it to fall on its face. I'm like, but you'll die. It's like, who gives a shit? Yeah, it sounds like like to them it sounds completely evil, but it's like it's just the identification problem, like identifying with their station and the myth of the system and its leaders and all that. It's like, yeah, of course this looks like death and despair, and I have empathy for that kind of suffering, but I feel like in a lot of ways the denial is voluntary. Like, the information is there, they can learn at any time and shift their allegiance. So, but I still empathize with the pain of it. It's not easy.
Yeah, I was just thinking while you were saying that that there's a problem of language too involved with that kind of thinking of the normies that you were just talking about. Is that and a little bit connected too with the comment of Jensen's about some people are plants or animals. Is that when we say we, the tendency is to assume that just refers to human beings, as though we somehow live in splendid isolation on the planet, completely insulated from any kind of deeper biological integration with everything else that's here. And I think there's a parallel too with the spiritual error of when we use the word I in language or me, where we assume when you say I, you people, the overuse of an identification with the word I leads people to think that they are a separate individual personality, an isolated creature. And so yeah, I guess the point I'm making is that language leads us into this trap of not connecting with who we really are as beings ourselves, and then also not connecting with all the other beings and the biosphere that we live in either. You know, the words I and we have caused a lot of a lot of people, I guess, to just be completely blind to who they are themselves and to what the planet is that they're living on. And if you don't, I just think that there's an advantage to be had in questioning language because it leads us to make certain assumptions, which
Yeah,
aren't correct.
I think you're
Go on.
absolutely right. I think one of the biggest problems that most people are facing now, and not to mention the normies, is that they, you know, as different from me, who has been thinking about these collapse things for like many decades. The normies were just hearing about it today. You know, like in this latest UN report, it talks about total societal collapse by 2050 or something, which of course is way too late for the real collapse. But anyway, it's the first time the UN talks about a total societal collapse, and that report came out this May. So back to the language thing is that their big problem is that they like everybody, most everybody I've met in my life to this day, think only about humans inhabiting this planet, right? So my point to the contrary is that the huge majority of people on this planet, and I'm using the Derek definition of people, right? The plants and animals and everything. The huge majority of people on this planet will actually see it as a positive when our human civilization collapses, because that means the end of the encroachment of human spaces, industrial areas and living areas for humans, and the poison, you know, the poison stream from factories and fields and stuff. All of that stops, and also humans will decrease in numbers, and in isolation that is a terrible thing, you know, if you put on your human face. I'm sorry for laughing, but yeah, I'm just trying to explain it. So it's a terrible catastrophe for us as a species, but the huge majority who has been under our heels for thousands and thousands of years, for them it's a positive. So I'm not kind of I'm not suggesting it will be a vote where a plant and an animal will have a vote, but in their minds anyway, and in their experience for the first 200 years after our collapse, they will be all for it, and that's my assumption.
Yeah, there's two things here. I was thinking about the human exclusion zones that we already have, and the notable ones that people tend to mention are the no man's land between North and South Korea, where apparently the wildlife is amazingly, you know, it's just remarkable area of regeneration of the natural environment. And even in the areas around Chernobyl, even though there's toxicity there, enormous return of wildlife there as well, simply because most of the people are being kept out. But I think, you know, there's a question which is, you know, I mean, I know Hugh spoke about this terrible blight of the alien cortex, but I wonder, should we feel bad about this in the sense that was it more or less inevitable that human beings would end up doing this, coming to this extremity? You know, would it if you reran the experiment, would it probably still do more or less the same thing to the planet?
Well,
Yeah.
I think
I suppose I just finished the question, which is that, and also the question is, you know, should we be on a guilt trip about it? You know, and if anyway, I'll go on. I'll let you talk.
I don't think we
yeah,
should be on a guilt trip. I think, as you know, as we discussed last Sunday when you were not here, Gary, we were discussing when humans went over the line or something. You know, when we sort of passed our tipping point. So that was, yeah, it's like either it was 300 years ago or 10,000 years ago, like with the agriculture or the industrial revolution. So I think to your question, we would have come to this point eventually anyway at some point. And as Guy McPherson and a lot of other people say, we living now are kind of happy to be able to witness this. It's it's just in isolation. It's kind of, why would you kill yourself now? It's sort of the final big finale of human civilization. So totally, I'm not gonna pull the trigger now because So that's sort of I think for us living now, it's like, why wouldn't you want to witness this? It's like, it's the last episode of Twin Peaks or whatever, right? But back to your more serious question about guilt trip. I don't think it's not. It's not up to us. We don't have any agency as individuals or as a species anymore. So it's not our guilt the way I see it, and also going back to what I was said earlier, I think our going away, or our civilization going away, is a positive, for all the other people on the planet. So therefore, because you have the duration element of our going off the charts with the population and heating and everything, it's how long it lasts, which is one of the most important aspects of our ecological footprint. So the shorter time our excess lasts, the better for everybody else on this planet.
I think also using the term guilt has a kind of a Christian, well, we are a civilization that we are here based on Christianity, has a sort of original sin type of thing to it. And it reminds me of what George was saying to Michael Dow, George Tsakraklides, I can't find it hard to say his name, Tsakraklides, with Michael Dow about the, we were doomed, we're a species that was at the beginning doomed and meant to destroy our environment and disappear and go extinct. And I think that's going to be one of the questions I'd like to ask him when we meet. I think it's on the on the 5th of June, next Sunday, at the same time. Actually, it's going to be an early, not exactly the same time. I think it's 7 or 8. Check it on Reddit. But we're going to have 2 meetings next Sunday, in the morning with George, and in the evening we'll have the Western. So just letting you know. But yeah, that would be an interesting topic to go back on, this guilt thing, this original sin. Is the original sin the alien cortex? Don't know.
Well, yeah, that I've wondered about that a lot, and I've been trying to piece together because like I've had like really weird dreams and stuff, and I've been thinking about like when it all went wrong, like when it became inevitable, and I wonder if it was just like how Hugh wrote in the serious introduction, how the odds of skirting the alien cortex destroying everything was like a quantum fluctuation. Maybe at some point in primordial human history, the intellect, the demiurge, whatever you want to call it, the alien cortex won the power struggle against like the creativity and humanity and soul of our species, and then this technological monstrosity then became inevitable. But I don't know like when exactly, though. That's the problem. There's like no positive evidence, but you can kind of see it echoing through myths like Cain and Abel. In Norse mythology, Hugin and Munin, those two ravens. One is clearly the right hemisphere and the left hemisphere of the brain. Um, yeah, and then I don't know exactly when, but whenever that power struggle was resolved was when this became inevitable. And then as for guilt, I don't feel guilty because, they're like, I think we were doomed before I was even born with how inevitable all this stuff was. So, what I do is I've done my best to reduce intermediaries and excess in my life. And I never utter a word in defense of this system because I know who I'm loyal to.
Yeah, about dreams. I recently dreamt that me and my buddy, the same guy I went to the Soviet Union with in the 80s for a nature youth ecological festival in Murmansk. So I dreamt that he and we were in a enclosed room with in total 8 people with machine guns, and the others were our enemies. And I think mostly because the others shot each other or killed each other, he and I were the only ones to go alive out of that room, and because of that, and because we were the good guys in my head anyway, I didn't feel any guilt whatsoever because when you're in that situation, your task is to survive, basically, in a very basic way. But I remember the rest of the of the movie or the dream was that we survived this extreme violent event, and we went out into, I think, Norway, and we tried to sort of go around town and celebrate and have fun and in some kind of park or amusement park or that kind of stuff, and tried to have a drink and stuff, and everybody was sort of looking at our bodies, which were full of holes from bullets and stuff. So we were sort of, oh, go away, you don't look right and stuff. So we were just trying to celebrate the fact that we were still alive, So that's one of the pretty intense dreams I had for the past week. Yeah.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah, and the one of the dreams I had that was really interesting. This was about a couple months ago when I was just really in the dumps, super depressed, crying a lot during the week. So it was having the question of like, what the heck is wrong with us? Again, I always come back to that question. And so in the dream, I woke up on the shore of the ocean, and the goddess Nyx rose out of the ocean, and I can't remember what I asked her, but she wanted to see my arm, so I extended it out to her, and she made a little cut with her claw on my arm, and golden light shone out, like a shaft of golden light shone out of my arm. And then on her same arm, she turned her arm over and blood was oozing out. So like so it was on my left arm, so on her left arm where that cut was on mine, blood was coming out. And I think what that means is just the gods are in all living things, is that like these crazy ideas of trying to build towers up to the sky or kill in the name of God. Like, I think it's all, this terrible death fantasy, because I feel like the kind of feeling of the dream is that like the gods are in all living things. They're in our bodies. It's not this immortal soul it's not these individual immortal souls that go to some sky father. It's one ocean soul that we all kind of emerge from. Yeah, and I think humans are the only creatures on the planet that have forgotten that. We have the ability to lie to ourselves. Like, um, and like wolves, I was around wolves and volunteering at a sanctuary, and they have no delusions of what they are. Like, they don't deceive themselves. It's just that honesty that other animals have is refreshing. And then here we are living in the society of of lies, where we're just forced to be hypocrites. Yeah.
Totally. Yeah.
Hey, to come back to something much more down to earth, because that's the way I am. I had an epiphany when I was studying biology. I was quite a young student, and then I discovered that our body that we have now is nothing to do with the body we had when we were younger, and because of the constant renewal of cells, the skin I have now, by the rate of turnover of cells from the base to the top that go away, etc., is not my skin. My bones are not my bones that I think are my bones when I was born with, or when I was a teenager, or when I was a young woman, because the bones are constantly destroyed and reconstructed with new cells constantly. And this goes for sorts of organs in your body. Yes, you say. So it's all, I had this sort of epiphany, because I suddenly think, what am I? And it sort of brought on an awful lot of cascades of things at a young age, where I started to reflect on what you're saying, and all this kind of fleeting assumptions about who we are and what we are. And also when I discovered the biome we live with inside our body, that's got billions and billions of creatures inside us, between bacteria and viruses and parasites and things that live on us and in us. And it was just such a wonderful epiphany. I can tell you, the joy I got, and I don't know if that joy was not connected to the connectedness at the same time. It suddenly made a bridge, like you talk of that gold light and the golden and the blood. This is the divine, because the divine is in us, because it is, because that's what it is. And you observe. I mean, I'm more a science oriented person, so I see that through the discoveries of what I see in our body and around us and in the plants and everything. But I can totally understand where you are, TB.
Yeah, I'm not sure, like dreams like that and insights like that, like words don't do them justice, but I think that gold light is just the general consciousness, not like my individual consciousness, but like all the consciousnesses of all living things on this planet and in the universe. And yeah, it's yeah, humans on this planet have forgotten that. Yeah, it's just sad. It's just sad. It makes me cry.
Yeah, it's in my case, on our cottage, I was only 19 days old when I first went to our family cottage in the first Easter holiday of my life. And when I said that I had to be put in the hospital after going over to cow milk, my conversation with my mother the other day was that at that cottage in the mountains, the farm on the other side of the road was still, an active farm in those days. And my first epiphany, which I, kind of revisited 5 or 6 years ago when I went to the same place, was that this is the place where I had the big sort of we are part of nature epiphany when I was like from 0 to 1 or 2 years old. And that was where my parents would take me in to buy milk when we were in the mountain, basically. So when we were going there to buy cow milk from the farm, that was when I discovered the big sort of mountain forest behind the farm, and so I got this, wow, this is nature. I'm a part of this nature. I got it, before I could speak almost. I got this huge epiphany about the bigger mother. I had my mother and the bigger mother, which was sort of the nature mother, right? And at some point, it was that kind of cow milk, either from that farm or from the shops, that made my parents send me to the hospital, where I had to be isolated for a week or something, and away from mother and everything. And just to think about that huge sort of transition from being with your parents who love you very much, and your other big Mother Earth, which is just in front of you, and you just discovered it, and you just love it totally, and to be put into a concrete hospital, like the and my parents weren't even allowed to visit during that week because this was, it was science, and we had to be isolated to isolate all the other possible factors to the problem and everything. So yeah, so it's a very big step from the green nature to the gray concrete hospital. Yeah.
Yeah, it's feeling the nature around you and feeling the nature in you harmonizing, and then getting cut off from that is, yeah, it's painful. It's sort of like being ripped out. It's sort of like ripping a plant out of the ground. Yeah. Yeah, when I was up in the wolf sanctuary, it's pretty close to like Idaho wilderness up in the mountains, so it was away from droning traffic and stuff. And yeah, when I didn't want to go back, but you have to pay rent, so yeah, you come back to the city, it's all loud, it's disruptive. You get used to that peace, and it's like you never forget it. You never forget it.
Totally. And in relation to the Ted Kaczynski episode we had a week ago, my kind of salvation, when I was in my 20s, just like when he went into his cottage and stuff, was that point one, I had friends and I had a girlfriend, a live-in girlfriend. And point two was that we were in Oslo is very sort of wild, what do you call it? Outdoor wildlife kind of place. So it's a short way you can take the subway actually into the forest and the mountains. So we were sort of pendulum between the forest in the weekends and back to the city and university in the week. And when you were out and soaking wet in your boots and stuff, you kind of longed back to the city. And when you came back to the city on Sunday evening, you kind of hated being back in the city because, so it was kind of it kept us going because we loved to be dry on our feet on Monday, but we kind of hated it because we wanted to be back in the forest. But that sort of stopped us from moving into the isolated wilderness permanently, because going from A to B and back to A next weekend was sort of kind of ideal situation, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, you know, this all kind of reminds me. So recently, YouTube algorithm threw the talk Gary had with you a long while ago, and re-listening to that, that was a gem. So like, part of it talked about like the aura, and then how the system and the controllers are studiously trying to prevent the high-risk gamos, which is that expansive feeling of self beyond self. Because if that happens, then the control, the whole narrative of personal story control and institutions, if humanity has that experience, then I feel like the Eros will strike a blow, and that's what they don't want, because you know they're vampires, they feed off of death, they're death eaters.
Thanks for reminding me of that conversation of Gary and Hugh. I will put that on my list of things to
Well,
listen.
yeah, we should just put it on the sub because it's just so good.
The thing is that was very much inspired by the talk between Hugh and Michael that came a few days before, because they touched on a few things, and it kind of set me on fire, you know. And that's why Hugh and I ended up having that conversation. But I just was thinking while you were talking earlier, DB, you know, about your dream and the kind of also the missed connection with Mother Nature. And I think again, you know, at a very fundamental level, I think we're still doing an alien cortex thing, which is inversion. Was one of the things that Hugh used to talk about, that the alien cortex was always engaged in. And I think even in a well-meaning discussion, trying to encourage people to consider their connection with nature and the Mother Earth and this kind of thing, we're proceeding from I don't know how to put it. We're proceeding from manifestation and materiality, and then looking back to the connection, whereas might be, I think in a way we're getting it in reverse, that we should be considering that the primary thing, if we feel or understand our connection to the primary thing, which is, you could probably just call consciousness, that what is shared universally is what the prime thing is consciousness, and everything springs from that, and that may be a more productive way, a more beneficial way of looking at existence, rather than working from every separate thing, the connection between every separate thing, which is a large computation and is rather unwieldy. It's actually simpler to look at the one thing that everything arises out of. You know, I mean, in the traditional Hindu thing of everything being a Brahma's, the dream of Shiva or Brahma. That you know, if we go back to the prima mater, which I think is one of the things that Hugh and I spoke about, that the sort of cosmic consciousness, if you like, or you know, you could call it God if you want to, that to see our rootedness in that, and then once you've seen that, your connection with everything else comes automatically. It's not something that's a thought. It comes. Thanks. Yeah. Yeah. So that was just my point. That I was just sort of putting forward the idea that it might be better to look at the totality of existence from the point of view of what underlies all existence, rather than looking at the multiplicity of existence and trying to stitch it all together with our place in it. Just kind of look at it from the other way around.
Yeah, I think that's right. And correct me if I'm misunderstanding like that view is so the view is like the prima marta, Mother Nature, the consciousness emerges from her, and then the experience of the conscious of itself and its other mirror forms and the diversity of all of us on this planet and then the universe is her play. And so, is that correct? Is that the kind of idea of it, or?
Well, I mean, it's always this trouble of trying to put into words something like this, because it can't really be captured in words, you know.
Yeah, but I
uh,
get what you're saying because the
mm,
fundamental of it is consciousness itself because that is the experience we're all having right now. Yeah.
I think what
yeah. Oh, go on, Torstein.
I think what Sophie said about starting with unity makes a lot of sense. You know, I don't know about all of these Eastern philosophy very much, but you know, for me personally, my path sort of started with this huge feeling of unity with the forest and the mountains and everything. And when I came to university, like 18 years later, I just rediscovered that unity when I read the big eco philosophers of Norway, from Norway, and sort of the Arne Næss, the deep ecology stuff about all species on the planet being of equal value. That was sort of obvious to me. I didn't have to be converted or convinced about it. Even it was just an obvious thing, you know. So starting with Unity, but that was just, you know, in my case, I think that was just lucky, or just it happened to me. I don't know if it happened to most Norwegians or Scandinavians. Maybe my mother and father took me more into the nature than other people, you know. But it's a good thing when you can read philosophy later in your life and just say, yeah, that's right, yeah, that's accurate, because you already thought about it, because you were already kind of introduced to it through ordinary life, I think.
Yeah, words are empty without the experience, the authentic, real emotional experience of actually being there and present in it. And yeah, I think another thing that we'll have to try to convince George of when the conversation comes is because like so the view there is that like human intelligence makes it inevitable that the planet is destroyed and we go extinct, but I think with what we understand about Hugh's idea of the alien cortex, I think that the intellect is the narrowing of our consciousness, actually. I don't think it's intelligent at all. It's the narrowing of our brain to control things, and it destroys experience.
Well, it's back to the master, and it's a mystery, isn't it, that we've discussed in previous meetings. It's this dominance by the alien cortex that's the problem. It's not the alien cortex that's the problem. You can teach certain animals tricks and logic. They can do sequential ordering of things. There is probably little parts of the brains of all species have got some little things that are maybe not intellect, but logic, rationality, that can be little snippets of it. But what is the problem with our species, I think, is the dominance of it. And a lot of what Hugh was telling us was about exercises and meditation to not necessarily to destroy it, but to control it, to get it under the rule of our consciousness. Yeah, I really, I'm the same as you, Tostin. I was at a very young age immersed in nature, in a very pristine place near the sea. And even though I was as a babe in Paris for a few years, I was taken very, very young to the country. And then all my youth until I was an adult was spent in the summer on the holidays in the woods and sleeping outside for weeks. And, you know, swimming in rivers and climbing mountains. And there is no words, but the feeling of oneness is immediately injected into your senses and your body when you encounter that at a young age, and it never leaves you. You know how people talk about, oh, I got good memories. Do you remember what's your best memory? What's your best time ever? All my best memories and sensations, and the ones I'd like to bring with me on my dying bed, are connected with the smell of flowers, the feeling of water, the noise of the wind in the trees, the feeling of my feet walking on dead leaves. I mean, sleeping out in the night. And, you know, there's nothing compares to that connection and that feeling that you are just in something that is your family.
Well, we have the mosquitoes in the north, so I don't really want to take the memory of a million mosquitoes to my deathbed. But, you know, I totally agree with you. This is just, you know, different kinds of nature. I would just like to mention one final thing that I think I noticed when I went into what we call secondary school or gymnasium, somewhere there. I noticed that the culture that we live in wanted to separate words and, you know, language and stuff from real life, and the tactic that I chose was to nail words in my textbooks and stuff, which I was reading and learning from, to the real reference in reality, in nature. You know, so it took me longer to read the math book or the history book or whatever, but by nailing it completely to a real life reference, it made me, I didn't have to read a text twice, because, you know, you understand it as a reference to something real at once, instead of like what you see today, like climate scientists and stuff saying something positive, you know, which is totally detached from reality, right? So being true to sort of what does this text mean in real life, and when I speak, everything I say has to be right. It has to be, you know, true and correct and stuff. That was kind of my choice in my youth years, and I was stuck by it, and that's why I sort of react so angrily when people are lying and stuff, because, you know, they're just not connected to anything, right?
Thanks for that. And do you know what I was thinking when you brought back Hugh and Gary's conversation, Mike and Gary and Hugh's conversation and all those, is that I don't know if I talked about it in the meeting before, but I know I talked about it with Gary. But I think it would be really nice if we brought on back in the future, or the near future, some one-to-one conversations between ourselves. Like one of us invites another guy and we decide to have a chat on without necessarily have to have a topic, one-to-one, and record it. And I think it can be a basis for interesting things, because the meetings being what they are now without you, now today is an exception because everybody's participating and it's brilliant. But, you know, there is this, I think it would be really enriching to have, I don't know, DB talking to Gary or Tom talking to Mike or whoever wants to do it. But I'm just leaving the idea there. But I hope people will pick that up, because those exchanges would be extremely, I think, profitable for everyone. And Hugh liked that. He really thought that when we had a conversation one-to-one, he wanted to record. He wanted to keep it. He wanted it to be, he wanted the moment to be shared and to be kept. And you know how the moment is important, because what happens when we do something live is live, you know, not non-edited and immediately is just priceless, I think.
Yeah, you can reach what do you call it? Epiphanies and magic can happen. Yeah. And plus you can look back on it years later and be like, wow, I learned so much since then.
Not at all. I know everything now. I'm sorry, I'm not going to. No, I'm there now, man.
Yeah, I have a favorite conversation from my YouTube channel with you, and not sure if I've told you, but I played the audio from that on a crossing of Greenland by a team of women and men crossing it with snow kiting from east to west, and just to have our exploration in words, me and you, and put on top of the exploration of Greenland from the east coast to the west coast, and just the the random sort of that audio to that video and stuff, it just sort of fits together perfectly like a puzzle, and it's like it's just a special kind of magic way to review that conversation, to put it onto another video track. It's kind of, yeah. Maybe at some point I will be allowed to do that on Rumble or Odyssey or something, without the copyright police, so to show it to other people.
Yeah, that'd be good. Yeah. Yeah, I just thinking of some of those audio remixes of talks. I think somebody was doing them with Alan Watts, with a kind of ethereal music or sounds in the background, and his voice kind of emerging from the audio landscape. You get this kind of dreamlike quality to it, which can be very effective. That's actually quite good, because it probably puts your brain into a more, maybe a theta brainwave pattern or something that's more receptive, less critical, and probably at some level you get more out of listening to some meaningful words that way. It's an interesting technique. And I think that connects with what you're saying about playing it too while you're on a journey like that. So that it's there and it's sort of, probably in a way almost subliminal, but it's part of what's going on. So yeah, we probably might do something with this as one-to-one conversations at some stage. So we're up to a fair while. Do we want to wind this up now, or
Yeah.
Anything else?
I think it's time to. We've nearly needed. Jesus, we're 2 hours and a half. We're soon going to reach the 3 hours without Lord Hugh, and that will. Wow, that will be.
Oh wow, time flies when you're having fun, doesn't it?
It's a new record. Yeah.
The cuckoo took the clock and flew.
Yeah. We'll go. Well, all right. Well, we have our 30 seconds just to be quiet and then end the recording, I guess. Starting just for convenience now. Okay. Well, thanks everybody for coming on. It was another great talk.
Thank you.
And,
Thank you very much.
yeah.
That was great today. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks everybody. Be safe out there and have a good Memorial Day weekend.
All right. It's always good to remember, at any rate.
Memorial Day, what's that?
Yeah, what is it? Remember
Just
what? What is
The
Memorial Day?
Europeans, we don't know.
No, we have no memory in Europe.
No, but I mean, just as a general idea, just to remember yourself as a spiritual brings you back to what's important. So, I mean, just as a general thing,
Yeah,
just remember,
exactly.
don't get carried away. Just come back to the center, or however you want to describe it.
Yeah, it's nice to have days with days for any memorial that you want to celebrate. Really.
Yeah, exactly. I brought it up to see if we would reinterpret it, which is good. Yeah. Yeah, so have the memorial and remembering what Gary said, what we said, and then let it go like a breath of air.
Okay, guys. Bye.
Okay. Thank you then. Bye-bye.
Cool.
Bye-bye.
Great guy. Bye.